everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist, percussionist, singer, composer, Don Drake.
Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be here on Bass Musician Magazine.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, Don. We always like to kind of go back in time to let people know kind of where you came from. How did you get started in music and on bass?
Well, I actually started on piano when I was like 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So I was playing piano up until I went to college. And then I did a head spin where I just kind of quit piano and music for a while and focused on college. And then I didn't get back into music until after I moved to New York City. Now I'm skipping kind of a big part of this whole process, which is the fact that I spent my junior year in Ghana, West Africa, in a study abroad program.
Oh.
So that's where I got into percussion. And I also there was also hard for me to continue with the piano because there just wasn't piano there.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of switched gears a little bit and started focusing more on percussion. And then when I moved to New York, I had had a little bit of experience on the guitar from high school, and I tried to switch to guitar. And one day I was going out to buy an electric guitar just for fun, and I ended up taking home a bass instead. And I don't really know why, but yeah, the bass just jumped off the wall, and I went home with it. And the guy said, "Well, it comes with a gig bag," and I said, "Well, I'm never going to have a gig," because that was not on my mind. And then a year later, I was playing in bands like with Herbie Mann's son and other cats, like jazz players from the New School of Jazz in New York City. So
very cool. And so did you pursue, again, you'd had your background in piano, did you pursue formal studies on bass, or did you?
A little bit. Yes, I took some lessons, not extensively. I learned a lot just by playing along with records in my living room.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I did take some lessons so I could learn how to read and some basic techniques. But I consider myself largely self-taught.
I think it's fascinating the aspect, again, the bass is the perfect instrument to combine percussion and melody. And so having a background with the percussive element kind of gives you that, I call it the insight of what's going on in between the notes, which is, my understanding, not only did you study in Ghana, but you studied in Brazil and had the opportunity to go to Cuba as well.
Yeah, so I, at the same time that I was picking up the bass, I was also focusing on learning congas and Afro-Cuban percussion. And so, it kind of went hand in hand for me. And I took a lot of lessons on percussion in Cuba. I traveled to Cuba many times, actually. So, the bass was always there. And, I think it was sort of just intuitive how I combined the two things together. Because I do think of the bass as a drum, and that's how it functions in my music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, it holds it down. I mean, the bass is the anchor. I learned early on that I had a lot of power behind when playing the bass.
Yeah.
In an ensemble situation, you have a lot of power to control where the ensemble goes. So that's one of the reasons why I chose to play the bass in my band, Zapote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I'm glad you bring up zapote because I did a quick lookup. Zapote is actually a kind of a medicinal fruit, if I understand correctly. It's something that is good for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, like any fruit, I mean, it's medicinal, but it's also delicious. Yeah. I mean, zapote is one of the fruits that I encountered when I first went to Cuba. And on every corner in Santiago de Cuba, there was batida de zapote, that like a milkshake made with zapote, and it was delicious. And I love the word. I guess it just sounded different to me. But yes, it is funny because it's kind of like calling your band Dawn and the Bananas or something like that.
Sure. Well, and I think for so many people that won't know what it is, it's until you discover the inner meaning and that it's something good for you and healthy, and that's kind of the underlying thing. How did Zapote come to happen? How did that come about?
Well, I needed a band to play my music. So that's how it came about. I'm sort of one of these people that wants to do everything. It's been sort of a blessing and a curse. So I wasn't happy just playing the bass, and I wasn't happy just playing percussion. I wanted to do more and write my own music.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to actually take voice lessons. And from taking voice lessons, then I started to write my own songs and using all the percussion elements and a lot of the music that I had been learning from playing around New York for so long and also traveling. So my original music, I needed someone to play it. And I'm not very good when it comes to computers and production and stuff. So I had to put the band together. Like, otherwise I could have put it together in a track or like some kind of, Ableton or Pro Tools or something like that. But it's just not my bag. So yeah, I prefer simple things,
Sure.
four string basses and, skin on wood, drums. That's sort of my mode of technology. So.
Absolutely. Well, and I always find it interesting because as I listen to the music that you guys are playing, it's got the intricacies of the Afro-Cuban kind of vein, kind of jazzy, kind of hip-hoppy. It's an interesting blend, and I love observing the evolution of music as this happens, because it's not pure one thing or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I'd like to think that I'm known for that kind of thing, for mixing it up. And I did mix a lot of elements in this CD. This is my third CD. I put out two others that are also fusions that have a lot of different elements in them, from the blues to soukous to house music, disco. So yeah, this particular CD, Nightshade, is a continuation of that, and I have to say that I draw a lot of elements from the Afro-Cuban traditions, from the bata drums, as well as rumba traditions from Cuba, and also there's my music is very jazz influenced, even though I don't really consider myself to be a jazz musician.
Mm-hmm. Well, the definition has got kind of, I'm going to say, it's got a little loose, especially when it comes to the Latin stuff, because I think they didn't know where to stick it, and decided if you just put jazz at the end of it. So a lot of the Latin music, especially in the New York scene, they refer to it as Latin jazz. And so when you go historically back to like all of the Fania stuff back in the day, they would just throw that in. It's Latin jazz. And it's like, well, no, it's Latin music, but you'll just tack on jazz. So it's all good, but it involves the elements of brass. You've got percussion, major, congas, minor percussion, horn sections.
Well, I think that is sort of one element that, yeah, you could say that it is somewhat of Latin jazz. Some of the songs, anyway, because they're more instrumental based, and we do have a big horn section, so that's nice. Yeah, and of course, there's the percussion. I'm thinking in particular the track Ethwap, Ethwaap. It starts with the rumba, like a wawanko, but it has a more of a Middle Eastern horn lines that's sort of reminiscent of Caravan or Night in Tunisia, something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting always to see how this is evolving as the planet gets smaller and we have a greater opportunity to listen to each other's music. And back in the day, you could hear it if you get your record in your hands. But now, thanks to the internet and things, you can kind of go almost anywhere to hear this stuff.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm very old school still in that I love to listen to my CDs, but yeah, I often wonder how people end up listening to what they listen to, especially when it's all at their fingertips, because I know that I wouldn't have listened to a lot of what I got into if it weren't for traveling. That became half the fun for me when traveling, was collecting cassettes. Because when I traveled all over West Africa, that's what I would do. I would collect all the cassettes of what I was hearing around me. I'd be like, who's that? Who's that playing? I would just buy the cassettes and then there was no other way to do it.
Yeah.
So that was always a big part of my journey, is like buying music in the place.
Absolutely. Well, and it was part of the being able to embrace any kind of world music. You had to go other places in the world because major labels were controlling what we were consuming. Now, I know it sounds kind of conspiracy theory, but I have, like my Brazilian collection, a lot of it, the labels are in Japanese because Sony Japan was managing it, but you weren't seeing it come into the US. It wasn't until like Sergio Mendes kind of pushed through the cellophane, and all of a sudden now there's a little interest, and now we can see some of this stuff. But there was so much happening everywhere else, all at the same time. It's just that radio and labels were not letting it come through. Now, as we progress from there, I always like to talk a little bit about how you get your particular sound, and that is with your gear. What are you playing on?
As far as bass, I did all those recordings on a Fender P bass, which was the 1978. My first bass, really, that I played for 17 years straight. That was always an interesting thing about being a multi-instrumentalist, is that collecting percussion and collecting keyboards and everything, you need a certain amount of funds if you're going to be a gearhead, right?
Sure.
So I had the same bass for 17 years, and that's the one I recorded all that stuff on, my P bass. We didn't do anything to it because it just sounded so good. I've been working with the same engineer for the last few albums that I did. His name is Dan Grigsby, and he was so used to that bass that we really literally plugged it in direct, and we didn't do anything really to it. Now, my mixing engineer, on the other hand, he also ran all the tracks through analog to tape. So there was a whole process of doing that I'm less familiar with.
That's why we have engineers, right?
Yeah, so the sound of the album is really due to his knowledge. Jeremy Page, he mixed the album, and Dan Grigsby recorded, tracked most of it, yeah.
Now, the bass that you're holding, is that your trusty P bass?
No, this is my Aerodyne bass. This is the one that I have graduated to. This is a Fender Aerodyne bass. I have gotten so that light is key for me. So this bass, I love this bass because it is light and it sounds good. And it also has the jazz pickup the P bass doesn't have.
Gotcha.
But I love my P bass, but yeah, it's just a monster.
And do you have a preference in strings?
I like DR strings, but I am also really, like I said, I'm not too much of a gearhead, but yeah, whenever I get a chance, I buy DR strings.
Gotcha.
And I love the Mark bass amps. That's my preference for amps.
Now, I'm doing I'm going to call it an unofficial survey, because we pay so much attention to our instruments. We pay attention to the amplifiers. How about instrument cable? How are you connecting your sound chain?
I use Fender cables. I'm a pretty big fan of Fender. So, yeah, I figured they have a lifelong warranty, and they last pretty long, and they're pretty sturdy.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I also, as far as effects, I've been known to use a lot of wah-wah on my bass from time to time. So I use, that's one sound that I think is kind of a signature sound for me, is the Crybaby wah-wah bass pedal. I
know that, again, recently released album. Do you guys have any plans, touring plans, anything coming up for the future?
Well, we're going to make, my next plan is to make a video. I have a single that I haven't recorded yet, so I would like to make a video for that single that's not on the album. We've been doing some shows around town a lot, and we play colleges, and I'm actually slated to go to perform at the Belize International Jazz Festival. Oh. This is my 4th year going to perform in Belize for the jazz festival. So I am a, let's say, self-made booking agent, promoter, composer, band leader, etc., etc. So I do all my own booking, And hey, if there's any booking agents out there who would like to help me out, that's awesome. But for that reason, sometimes I'll just I'll do it when I can.
Sure.
We get a lot of gigs in the city. We're playing some series that are out at Reese Beach, like summer concert series, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So we rely a lot on that as well. But yeah, I would love to tour. I just haven't exactly figured it out yet.
It is certainly a project, and when you have so many opportunities in New York City, there's so many places you could. I mean, really, it's kind of like, why?
Well, I mean, there's a matter of economics, and I'm just talking real talk right now.
Oh, sure.
Most of us have to pay like really high rents, so it's very difficult to take a band out on the road if you are not going to make enough money for them to pay their rent while they're gone. So, I mean, unless people are sort of into couch surfing and giving up paying their rent, which is not the case with my band, it's difficult. And the other thing is, I have a large ensemble.
Yeah.
So it to have the sound that I want can be a challenge on the road. So I need at least 5 people, if not more, to have my sound. So we do a lot of what we have been doing is we've been doing a lot of sponsored programs, like with Brooklyn Arts Council and college shows, and we even did some U.S. Embassy sponsored date a year ago or so. So I'm looking more for that kind of sponsorship to be able to make it work, economically speaking.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
And if people want to stay on top of what you're doing and what Zapote is doing, DawnDrake.com?
Yes. Yeah. DawnDrake.com, it has all the upcoming show dates as well as videos of. We have a YouTube page, which is youtube.com, The Dawn Drake. Mm-hmm. And also there's a lot of pictures and discography information from all the things that I've done in the past and what the band has been doing and everything. And of course, I have a band that happens to be very talented. So everybody has their own projects too. That's kind of the way things work in New York, is that not one person is just in one band. I mean, everybody plays with 10 bands, myself included. I play with a lot of other people too.
Gotcha.
And to me, it's a joy and a pleasure to play with other people and other bands, because it keeps it fresh and you get to sort of sit back and not have to be the boss, or you get a lot of inspiration from other artists.
Gotcha.
So
well,
it's a great environment.
I don't know anybody that makes it in New York that isn't involved in the hustle in one way or another. And it is the only city that I've reviewed. I think I'm up to about 3 separate books by authors on how to make it as a musician in New York City.
Really?
Dedicated to just that, because it's the kind of the story you'll get somebody that comes from, middle America or something. Left Kansas. They were the best bass player in Kansas, and they go to New York thinking, I'm going to make it big. And before you know it, they discover that it's a lot harder than they thought. And they needed tips. And some of the basic things are like, get a working gear. Make sure you have gear that works all the time, and make sure you have a car that will get you from A to B. And don't be abrasive. Be nice to people, because people won't want to work with you if you're terrible.
Personality matters. Personality makes a big difference. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and some of the things that you would go, well, that sounds like a real no-brainer, but again, they've some authors, some bass players have penned their books on how to do it and how to follow their tracks. Well, that said, Dawn, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing. I'm excited to hear what's going to be coming from Zapote in the future.
Definitely.
Folks, make sure you're checking DawnDrake.com. You've seen her here live on Bass Musician Magazine.
Thank you. And you can also hear it on iTunes and Apple Music and Spotify, musician, artist Dawn Drake. and stream away.
Perfect. Very cool.
Okay.